Welcome America, welcome Taylor Swift. So today we're doing a review for our test, and right now I'd like to go over the how to write a conditional statement, the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. And if we get to the law of detachment and the law of syllogism, that'll be great. We'll just see how long it takes us. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start. To write a conditional statement, we need an if, and then a hypothesis, and a then, and a conclusion. The statement we have is all guitar players are musicians. So if I write that as a conditional statement, if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician, would you agree that that's pretty much, for the most part, a true statement? Yeah. Pretty much, right? So now we need to, that's the conditional statement. Okay, now we need to write what's called the converse. And before I do that, I want to show you my meme, because we have a lot of trouble remembering the difference between the converse and the inverse, because the words sound really similar. One way I like to help you guys remember that converse is the switch is that you can have, I made this several years ago, you can take your Converse shoes and you can switch them, but you can't make them negative, right? You can switch them. So the converse is the switch. So the switch from the hypothesis and the conclusion, from if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician, is to if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. Is that a true statement? You can be a musician and not necessarily be a guitar player, right? You could play some other instrument, or you could be a singer or something. The inverse is when you take the original conditional statement and make the hypothesis and the conclusion negative. You negate them. So if you are not a guitar player, then you are not a musician. Is that a true statement? If you're not a guitar player, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not a musician, right? You could play some other instrument. And the contrapositive is, usually people remember the contrapositive because it's the longest word, and so we can remember to switch and negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. So that would be, if you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. Do you think that's a true statement? If you're not a musician, then you're not a guitar player. Yeah. So what's happening here about the truth statements and the truth values for these are coming. Please Google, please help me out here. Stay. Okay. The truth value of the original conditional statement, if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician, is the same as the truth value for the contrapositive. And same for the converse and the inverse. So, for example, if the converse is false, so will the inverse be false. If the conditional statement is false, so will the contrapositive will also be false. Okay, so that is what we mean by truth values. Now let's go to the law of detachment. And that's a big word, and a lot of people have trouble. As soon as they see that, they kind of freak out. And really, this is just really common sense. And a lot of times they leave out the then, and that's perfectly fine. If, what comes after the if is called the hypotenuse. Oh my gosh, the hypotenuse.
Hypothesis.
Thank you, hypothesis. If hypothesis, and then I'm going to insert the then conclusion. So the hypothesis is, I don't set my alarm. And the conclusion is, I will oversleep. So what happens with the law of detachment is really simple. They give you an if-then, a conditional statement. Then in the next statement, they state the hypothesis. They just tell you it's true. And so therefore you can conclude the conclusion. It's it, okay? If Miss Helbing gives a test and everybody gets A's. Miss Helbing gives a test. Therefore, everybody gets A's. Okay? If Miss Helbing walks her dog, then he pees. Miss Helbing walks her dog. Therefore, the dog pees. That's all there is to the law of detachment. Okay, we're having an introduction to logic, which is the foundation for writing proofs, and it's part of math, so it seems like it's not mathy, but I got books over there in that bookshelf from college that are just on logic. They're just on writing proofs. So this is just really an introduction to that. So the one thing you have to be careful about is when you're writing your conclusion, you can write the word therefore, you can write the 3 dots. Most people like the 3 dots. Therefore, I will oversleep. You're just stating the conclusion. You are not putting the then in. You're not writing anything about the alarm. It's just stating the conclusion. Any questions on the law of detachment? Okay, law of syllogism. If I go to Moe's, okay, then I will get chips. If I get chips, then I will get 3 kinds of salsa. So what's happening here is the conclusion of the first statement is the same as the hypothesis of the second statement. And because of that, we can just cancel them out. We can cross out that middleman right there and go straight from the hypothesis of the first statement to the conclusion of the second one. And that's all we're doing. If I go to Moe's, then I will get chips. If I get chips, then I get 3 kinds of salsa. Therefore, if I go to Moe's, I do love Moe's, then I will get 3 kinds of salsa. Nothing about the chips. Then I will get 3 kinds of salsa. I'm paraphrasing here. And that's it. Any questions on the law of syllogism? It's a big word, but it's really just common sense. The last thing I want to go over is the biconditional, okay? If you write a conditional statement, and I'll put it in the form if A, then B. And we've just talked about how the converse isn't necessarily true if the conditional statement is true, okay? But sometimes it is. You switch them and it's still true. So here's the converse. If B, then A. If both of those statements are true, you can write what's called the biconditional. You don't have to write both of those. You can just kind of put them together. And there's no if, there's no then. There's an if and only if. It's A, and then you can write if and only if, but I'm going to write IFF because that's short for if and only if, B. That's how you write the biconditional. Or you could write B if and only if A. That's it. Either one are fine. So I'm going to erase this. I'm going to take you to the answer here and show you. A person is a heritage student if and only if he or she is a member of the pride. Okay, because if I write, if you're a heritage student, then you're a member of the pride. That's true. We'll just say it's true, okay? If, the converse is, if you are a member of the pride, then you're a heritage student. That's also true. Since they're both true, the original statement and the switch, the converse, then you can write the biconditional. Basically, you can write them together. By writing it this way, it says whichever direction you write the hypothesis and the conclusion, first or last, it's a true statement. Any questions? Not a lot of questions today. All right.